You may be considering bankruptcy and feeling some stress and anxiety about the decision. Today, I'm joined with Jeffrey here, who took one of our Chapter 7 calculators and decided that bankruptcy was right for him and his spouse, and we're going to talk about his experience. Welcome to Ascend Finance YouTube channel, where we take complex topics such as Chapter 7 bankruptcy and break them down into human, simple, understandable language. My name is Ben, and I am the co-founder here at Ascend. After taking our Chapter 7 qualification cost calculator, we enjoyed working with Jeffrey so much that he was gracious enough to join the Ascend team and help other people that are facing financial hardship. And now he's here to talk about his bankruptcy experience. Thanks for joining us today, Jeffrey.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I would love to ask you we'll just go through a few questions to talk about your debt story, kind of the decision point and when you decided that Chapter 7 was right for you. Then we'll talk about maybe the process, the 341 Meeting of Creditors, and we'll kind of wrap it up with what's kind of next, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So first, I'd love to hear just about the debt story. Like, how did you decide that Chapter 7 bankruptcy or some debt relief option was right for you?
Okay, so I have been in debt for a very long time. Started right around the time I went to college and I turned 18. I got tons of credit card offers in the mail, and I didn't really have a significant background in like financial literacy and financial health. And so it kind of started around then. I was just with credit card debt, and fast forward, up till I was around probably 25 years old, I had contemplated doing a bankruptcy just because my debt was getting so hard to handle. I ended up shying away from it, and I went like a debt management route, and that worked, but it was more like a temporary band-aid on like a bigger problem. Fast forward, I got through the pandemic, and I owned a business at the time, and I carried some debt trying to keep it afloat for the duration of the pandemic while everything was shut down. And after it just got too much to handle. I got to a point where I was doing like transfers to pay other cards, make minimum payments, and then use the amount of the minimum payment to like buy groceries. And it was just a never ending cycle. And I really felt like I could not get out of it. And eventually at one point I did the math, and my minimum payments alone on my credit cards and various personal loans that I had was over half my income that I was bringing in each month.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Now, this is a bit of a plug for Ascend, but give me some understanding of how you determined what option was best for you and kind of what tools that you used to determine that option.
Yeah, so actually I remember it clearly. I was last year near the end of 2021, and I had just gotten done paying my bills for the month, and I was feeling super overwhelmed. In my income each month, I was being left over with less and less and less. And finally, it got to a point like where the holidays were coming up, and I was really, really stressed. And I was just like looking at everything, and I literally, like, after paying all my bills for the first half of the month, I was negative. And I remember I was about to take a shower, and I just started Googling like debt relief options, and the Ascend Chapter 7 bankruptcy calculator popped up. I didn't really know at the time that was going to be a good fit for me, but I still took it, and I compared it with other options, debt management and debt settlement. And then I was connected to Ascend, and I actually spoke with Justin, who kind of walked me through everything, broke down all the options for me. And I had lots of questions about various types of debt that I had, and if those would have been dischargeable, or if there was another way that I could go aside from bankruptcy, because everything that I had read had really put a negative like spotlight on bankruptcy, and I honestly felt like it'd be like the end all, and that I wouldn't be able to access any form of credit for like 10 years.
Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, a lot of people feel that way, and it's definitely like that makes sense. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And I guess the next question I have would be like, when you decided that bankruptcy was the right choice, how did you feel about that process? Like, were there other considerations that you made, other options that you were considering?
Yeah, so I actually, I interviewed 2 bankruptcy attorneys in the state that I lived in prior, and both, I kind of just got the feeling that bankruptcy right then wasn't the right choice for me. And so I did a brief stint in debt settlement, and I realized really quickly that was not the right decision for me. Just there were too many, the negatives or potential negatives of debt settlement outweighed anything. And then we ended up moving to a new state shortly after, and I interviewed a bankruptcy attorney there right after we moved, and it was too soon for me to file after moving to that state, so I had to wait a couple of months. But in the process, I found another attorney who was phenomenal, and when I met with her for a consult, when I was kind of like, I need to do something because like living expenses were going up, and and she took all of my ease, like all of my angst away, and she really broke it down for me and really made me feel like it was like the best choice for me.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so many people end up hiring a bankruptcy attorney for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Can you tell me a little bit about like the consultation process? How did that go? And then also like, what was it like to hire the attorney? Like, did they kind of mention the cost and all those things and the retainer agreement? Maybe just a quick explanation of that process.
Yeah, okay. So I met with my attorney. We did a consultation over the phone. It was about 35 minutes in length, and I felt she did a really good job. She just asked me like basically A to Z, any kind of financial question. She really got a whole like grasp of what my financial picture was, asked about any assets, different kinds of debt, income, like everything. And then at the end, she let me kind of ask her any questions, and I already had a lot of questions going into it, and so I was really able to ask her those, and she was really able to put my mind at ease on a lot of things that I was stressing about.
That's awesome.
And at that point I knew that she was a good fit, and so I had her send over the attorney agreement or like the retainer right away. I signed it and my spouse signed it, and we just moved forward. She offered the 12-month payment plan, but we just decided that after the bankruptcy I wanted no payments except for like housing expenses and like my car, and so we paid in full. We had to wait a month to come up with the money for it. We paid her in full. Nice. And then she got to work.
That's awesome. And I think one of the things that with filing and with a bankruptcy attorney, one of the things that we have done at Ascend when we built out our bankruptcy attorney network is that we're trying to find bankruptcy attorneys that are empathetic and are trying to solve a problem and not trying to make a sale. Like that's not what we're trying to do. That's not what they should be trying to do, because there's goals, and these are individuals that we're trying to help them get out of debt and stay out of debt.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about the paperwork. So you have to like send in a lot of paperwork, or
actually,
and how did that work?
Surprisingly, I had to do very minimal paperwork.
Oh, nice.
My attorney and her phenomenal paralegals handled everything for me. Really, my spouse and I just had to sign. That was
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we just had to sign. They went in for our signing appointment, and that's right there. They pulled our credit, and they had every single account that we had. We just had to verify. There was like one or two accounts that were not accurately reporting with the credit bureaus, and those I just had to provide like the lender name, and they were able to pull the address and everything and send them a notice of bankruptcy.
That's great. Okay, cool. And then tell me a little bit, like, so you file bankruptcy, and then what happens right after? Like, does your credit score drop right away, or what happens between the time that you kind of file, you get the paperwork, you file the bankruptcy, and then the time between that and the 341 Meeting of Creditors?
Yeah. So we signed everything on a Friday, and it was filed the following Monday.
Okay.
The state that we live in, you can only file on Mondays. And the second I filed, I remember I got a notification from Credit Karma probably about 2 hours after I got a notification from my attorney that we had filed, and the bankruptcy had already been reported.
Wow.
There's like an e-file system, and that everybody gets notified. And a lot of my major creditors all had like frozen my online access, so I couldn't make payments because the automatic stay goes into place where you can't make any payments and they can't contact you anymore. And about that first week, I felt like a tremendous sense of relief because a lot of the debt collection calls had stopped, and letters in the mail stopped. It was nice. And anybody who did still call, I felt very empowered because I was able to just say, hey, thank you for calling, but I'm actually right now, I just filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and I gave them the court name and I gave them my attorney's contact info.
Awesome.
And I was like, please just contact her from there. And everybody was super receptive and great. And by the end of week 2, I was getting no calls, no letters, absolutely nothing.
That's great. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And I think one of the big challenges that some people face is that, my credit score may be 400 now, but what's going to happen when I file bankruptcy? Is it going to go down to 350? Is there anything lower than 350? What was that process like? And then some people say the credit score went up because now you're taking away all those things that were negative, and now it's cleaning it. Cleans the good and the bad, I guess. But yeah, how was your experience with the credit score?
Yeah, so my credit score actually dropped significantly prior to filing bankruptcy. I believe it was somewhere in the 380s, and that was because when I went into debt settlement, I stopped paying everything in order to be a part of the program, and so it tanked. But actually, about 2 weeks or so after filing, my credit score actually increased over 200 points because a lot of the negative items and all the debt got turned to zero, and that's just because they stopped reporting instantly. They're not allowed to report while you're in bankruptcy, and so all my balances got turned to zero, and a lot of my accounts that had really negative remarks all got removed off my report.
Wow, that's great. And so one of the things that we'll cover in a later video, and if you're interested in these type of videos, like I definitely encourage you to subscribe. We're going to try to do a few other videos after discharge, and then also a video that kind of covers credit rebuilding after discharge and the experience and kind of what you were doing. But one of the things that to be aware of is that there could be things on your credit report after discharge that are the creditor is doing something incorrectly. And there's like 5 different ones, and we'll kind of tackle that in another video. But just be cognizant that when you file, your credit score could go up, but then there might also be things that you need to address that are mistakes, and we'll address that in another video. So just want to let you guys know of that. Now, one of the big, I think, stressors or anxiety-inducing meetings is the 341 meeting of creditors. So I'd love to hear kind of what you anticipated the experience of the 341 meeting of creditors was going to be like, and then your actual kind of experience with the 341 meeting of creditors.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had never really done anything in a courtroom prior to this, and so I only had known like what I had seen on TV, and I did not know what to expect. And I was okay, a couple of weeks prior, because your 341 meeting is approximately 1 month from your file date, and I was okay until we got to about the week before, and I started getting more anxious just because the questions, the attorney could give me kind of a general idea on what questions would be asked, but I know the questions vary from trustee to trustee and state to state. And so I made the mistake of going on Google and looking at everything. And I saw some horror stories on there. And I was really just concerned of like, oh, what happens if like something like got omitted or didn't get accurately represented? When I did my best, and my attorney did her best to put everything on our application or our petition. And I was just like mostly worried that I would know the answer to a question, and which that simply was not the case. Most of the questions were yes or no, and it was super quick, super painless. I really psyched myself out for no reason. Yeah. I realize that now, and so it was nothing to be stressed out about. The whole, from start to finish of our portion of the meeting took maybe 5 minutes.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And for those that are watching, what we'll do is we'll also include a link in the description below to a blog post that covers some of the questions that you might be asked in the Meeting of Creditors, and we'll also include the link to the calculator as well. The free Chapter 7 calculator. I would love to hear kind of like whether did any creditors come to your meeting, because like I think that's partly a concern, is like, well, what if Discover or Capital One shows up? Like, did any creditors actually show up?
I was worried about Discover showing up because I had a couple of accounts with them, but nobody showed up. I was surprised. The meeting was done over Zoom, so I don't know if that really played a role in it or not. But yeah, nobody showed up, and it was actually a really positive experience.
Yes, and actually in many of the meetings that I've gone to, a creditor does not show up, so that takes away a little bit of stress.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last couple questions were in relation to your 341, like how long did the call last, and then were there any oddball questions that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so we were instructed to get on. Our call started at 11:30, and we were instructed to get on right then. Mine and my spouse's name. It wasn't our turn till probably about 15 minutes in, so we were just waiting in like a Zoom waiting room, and then the trustee let us in and our attorney in when it was our turn, so we couldn't hear anybody else's questions, or it was just basically we were just looking at the computer waiting to be called in. After, she just asked like very basic questions, and then near the end, how I get paid, sometimes it's taxes aren't taken out from one of my businesses, and I get payment through Venmo, and I then transfer the Venmo funds into a business account, and I forgot on my application to list that I had a Venmo, and then she asked specifically what the Venmo was, because the trustee is provided 6 months of bank statements prior to your filing date, and so she was able to see the Venmo cash out.
Okay, cool.
And then she also asked questions about like what my LLC was and where the money came from that.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, so that's all the time we have today to cover some of the questions, but sort of what's like next for you, Jeffrey, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, so my bankruptcy should be discharged in the next like probably 5 or 6 weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. It's just been ever since the middle of August, it's just been like a waiting game. I haven't really gotten anything in the mail about it. They just said that it's like the longest part is after the 341 meeting. You're just like waiting for the discharge, and my attorney said that that's because they have to make sure that all the creditors get properly notified, and they have a certain amount of time to object. Not that they will, and if they do, then there's a whole process that happens, but you just have to wait, and that makes sense. But yeah, I'm excited to see what my credit score will be after. In the interim of when I filed, I've been getting tons of offers for credit that a lot of them are like, when you're done with your bankruptcy, come see us and we'll get you this card or this secured card. And then there have been multiple car dealerships in the area saying, hey, come in right now, we can finance you on a new vehicle. So it'll be interesting to see how my credit rebounds after, especially now that while I'm in an open bankruptcy and I'm already getting offers of credit.
Yeah, so a lot of people, many people that I've spoken with have this fear that they're not going to access credit again. But I remember, Jeffrey, that you showed me a whole handful of like companies that were willing to extend credit while you're in the bankruptcy or after the bankruptcy, shortly after.
Yeah, I received 12 my first week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 12 offers.
That's a one And I guess one of the last questions I have is, many people are concerned that how do I rent an apartment after filing or before filing, because I'm going to need to move soon. Like, what was your experience? Because I knew you and your spouse just moved. Yeah. What was your experience about moving and renting an apartment after bankruptcy or during bankruptcy?
So yeah, we actually moved like about a week after my 341 meeting. And when they pulled my credit, they obviously saw the open bankruptcy on there.
Yeah.
The leasing agent who we worked with actually said that helps. It helps us qualify for the apartment because our DTI is so much lower. And they automatically assume that your bankruptcy is just going to be discharged, it's not going to be dismissed. And so they just set you up for success and say, okay, that actually looks great. And we were able to qualify for a lower deposit because our credit score had increased due to the bankruptcy being open.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeffrey, just today to kind of share your bankruptcy experience. If you like this video, please subscribe. We're planning on making 2 other additional videos. One is covering the discharge process after discharge, and then the second video is kind of covering how to rebuild your credit score after filing bankruptcy. We built a free credit rebuilding portal specifically for bankruptcy. I'll include a link in the description below, but we're going to cover that and like how do we help people get back to 720 credit score after filing bankruptcy. That's one of our big goals. And finally, if you're still deciding between your options, please feel free to take our free Chapter 7 bankruptcy cost and qualification calculator that I include a link in the description below. It will compare your options so you can compare it to Chapter 13 bankruptcy, debt settlement, debt management, the cost of those options, and those are personalized to your area, so your city and your state. It will also give you pros and cons of each option, and it will give you reputable providers in the area that can serve your county, and they provide free evaluations as well. Hopefully we'll help you get out of debt cheaper, easier, and faster by making the most unbiased decision. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.